Canelo versus Triple G Part 3 is over. And you know what, man? 40 years old really is 40 years old. At the end of the day, that's what I was saying. You know, I thought it could have went one of two ways. I thought it could have went in the way of Golovkin, you know, looking like a 40-year-old, which for 3/4 of the fight he did. And then I also thought it could have also went, you know, where Canelo maybe wasn't as motivated anymore, seeing the way he lost the Bivol fight, where he almost chose not to take chances. And I could see that also translating into this fight as well. But at the end of the day, it was the former, not the latter. Golovkin looked every bit his age. You know, I found this fight to be interesting in that degree. Canelo just looked a bit more explosive, better shot selection. You know, had better legs, changing range very well, and also did something that, you know, we haven't seen Canelo really do. He was jabbing with the jabber. You know, well, I don't really typically see Canelo jabbing a lot, and even really having an ability to jab at a lot of guys consistently. But it's almost as if he knew that, you know, Golovkin's game plan coming in was going to be more so to box and to use that jab like he did in the second fight. Canelo, you know, his jab worked every bit as well, and of course the older Golovkin just didn't have the legs to, you know, just have enough variation on that jab either. You know, with Jonathan Banks as the trainer, I wasn't surprised that, you know, Golovkin was going to come out with doing a little bit more boxing than say the Golovkin of Diego Sanchez days. You know, plus, as we said, you know, your age only can take you so far. I felt Canelo had some interesting shot selection with you know, those overhand rights and the left hooks. Very, very explosive. One thing Golovkin was having trouble with was also when those shots were coming. At best, he was making them miss. He never really made Canelo pay all that much for missing those shots, or even, you know, and Canelo landed his share of those shots as well. But I don't think he ever really was a threat to make Canelo pay for even throwing those shots, you know. And the thing about that is, you know, if Canelo has nothing to fear when he throws those shots, you know, he's going to keep throwing them, you know, and then he kind of got confident in throwing them, you know. But again, change of range. Canelo was, you know, stepping back, changing distances, then coming back in, using that jab. Golovkin just a lot of times, man, especially the first 3/4 of the fight, he was in range to punch. He just couldn't pull the trigger. You know, it's like, it really is that old man syndrome where you're in position to punch, you see the opening, and you just don't throw it. If you watch the fight, Golovkin got in range a lot, you know, like he was right there, and he just couldn't really get off with anything creative aside from like touching right hands and touching jabs. You know, at about the 7th, 8th round, he started showing a little short uppercut at times. And then I thought late in the fight, interestingly enough, I thought Golovkin actually, you know, really pushed the issue a little bit more, and, you know, kind of went for broke. You know, never really was a threat to knock Canelo out, but really pushed things a little bit more to the point where, you know, Canelo had to have some respect for him and started backing up more consistently, and just wasn't as enthusiastic anymore. You know, which really leaves this fight questioning pretty much the same things about Canelo as well. You know, Canelo, you know, doesn't typically finish fights all that well. You know, finishes fights a little bit on the slow end. With Bivol, he certainly finished on the slow end. And against a 40-year-old man, you would have expected him to, you know, just have a more explosive ending. I'm not saying you got to be the first guy to knock Golovkin out, although that wouldn't have shocked me. But you just figure that the younger, fresher guy is going to, you know, finish off the fight just more explosive, basically with more of the upper hand against the older 40-year-old, fading 40-year-old, you know. And you know, people are gonna say, oh, well, you know, Canelo has had a busy schedule and all that other stuff. You know, he's been pro since he's 15 years old. Listen, bro, Golovkin has had like a million amateur fights, and over there they don't just have the million amateur fights on the record, they also have another million off the record and smokers and everything else. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to mileage on the odometer, you know, I think Golovkin has more mileage on the odometer, you know, not just because of age, he also the quality he was fighting. I mean, Canelo turned pro at 15 fighting taxi cab drivers. You know, Golovkin has been fighting world-class opposition, I mean, since very early in his amateur days. I mean, the Soviet boxing system in the amateurs was insane. And even though when the Soviet Union first broke up, you know, he was a kid and he was coming up in that Kazakh and Eastern European system. I mean, that's just an insane system. As a matter of fact, it was so insane that the Olympic final that Golovkin lost to Gaidarebekov, if that's 15 years earlier, those two guys are from the same country. You know what I'm saying? So not one of them wouldn't have even been in the Olympics, let alone and the final being the Russian against the Kazakh Garbekov against Golovkin. That just goes to show you how difficult it was to succeed in that system, even as an amateur. You know, and then of course his pro career was you know, very insane. Obviously, about 20 or so title defenses. You know, you really got to appreciate Golovkin, even at 40 years old, given the effort he gave yesterday, and really showing the heart to close the fight to the best of his ability. You know, again, he just couldn't wow you anymore with anything too explosive. But certainly a lesser fighter, Golovkin will still give problems to, as we saw in the Rio Murata fight a few months back. Canelo mentioned that he needs some rest. He's had a busy schedule himself. You know, maybe some rest will do him good. I don't quite see him having a chance against Bivol. I mean, nothing I saw last night really made me think that he would have a realistic chance of beating Dimitri Bivol. But of course, Dimitri Bivol has his hands full with Zurdo Ramirez. That's a really good fight, man. I'll go into that later on. But Zurdo and Ramirez, Zurdo Ramirez and Bivol is a very good fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And maybe Canelo will make a decision on whether he wants Bivol next or not based on the way Bivol looks in the Ramirez fight. You know, well, first of all, if he wins or loses in number one, and then number two, how he looks in doing either or. You know, nonetheless, one thing that impressed me about Canelo is, you know, his ability to use the jab a bit more. I hadn't really seen a lot of that in Canelo's career. Typically, jabbers bothered him. Golovkin, though, last night seemed to be pretty much predominantly a jabber. He couldn't really pull the trigger on anything else. And even on his jab, a lot of times, again, I'll reiterate the fact that he got at close to middle range a lot in the fight, and he just couldn't get off it. He was just literally looking at Canelo, and then Canelo would just start, you know, getting off some explosive shots instead. But he didn't even get them off right away. So Golovkin had the chances to get off first when he was in that range. He just didn't do it, you know. And then Canelo's jab was actually so effective that he was backing up Golovkin. Even when he missed it, you know, there was a lot of times where Golovkin would earn the position, get in position, and then not pull the trigger. He'd kind of just be there, and Canelo would double jab at him, and Golovkin would never really be able to counter that much. He would step back and give up that position, and then he'd have to start all over again. And with Canelo gaining back the middle of the ring and having the better legs and being able to change range, it gave Canelo a lot of advantages for those remainders of those rounds, or for big parts of those rounds anyway, you know. But again, I still give Golovkin credit for closing the fight strong. I don't think the fight was ever in doubt by that point, unless he got a knockout, and I don't think he was ever even a threat to knock Canelo out the way he was winning the late rounds. But still, you do have to question Canelo's ability to close fights strongly. There's a 40-year-old Golovkin, and we would expect a 32-year-old phenom to make sure he closes the show in a more spectacular fashion against this older guy who's fading. And you know, especially when you're trying to prove that that, you know, some of the things that you've been criticized about are just talk and not reality. In the end, people are going to talk about the win Canelo got last night, but I still found it a bit disconcerting that he couldn't finish the fight stronger against this old guy. But at the same time, it's reason to praise Golovkin, a Hall of Fame career. He mentioned that he wants to go back down to middleweight. I think he still has titles at middleweight. I don't know. I think it would be a great way to retire. He didn't do himself a disservice last night. I think retiring now would be terrific for him, instead of, you know, having a guy like a Charlo put you out of your misery and just, you know, really risk, you know, taking you out altogether. You know, like, because at a certain point there's going to be nothing left. I mean, you keep going to the bottom of the barrel at a certain age, and there's going to be nothing left. He fought well last night. You know, listen, he had Canelo in front of him. He fought well. He didn't get stopped. He did a good job. But personally, I think Golovkin should retire, regardless of him having the middleweight titles. But it's kind of hard to walk away when you have titles and they still pay you to defend them, right? So I suppose we'll see Golovkin again. And with Canelo Alvarez, I'd like to see him fight Benavidez. You know, I tweeted last night that you know, he always had the Golovkin third fight in his back pocket. You could just age out Golovkin and just choose it and pick it whenever he wanted it. Especially that he was awarded the decision in the last fight and he got a draw in the first fight, so he didn't even have a loss on his record against Golovkin, even though he probably deserved at least one. And you know, it was going to leave Golovkin thirsting for that other opportunity. So the fight was always in his back pocket where you could age out Golovkin and fight him. But Benavidez is really the guy that I think if you're going to stay at 168 with those titles that the world wants to see Canelo defend against. And that I think would be an amazing fight. You know, I know Canelo's mentioned he doesn't like to want to defend against Mexicans. He doesn't want to fight against Mexicans. He's trying to play that card. But Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was a Mexican, and it's probably the worst Mexican champion that may be in history of boxing. So if he chose to defend against him, or he chose to fight against him, there's no reason not to give some top-level Mexican champions an opportunity, be it that may be, you know, David Benavidez at 168, which would be amazing, but also possibly Zurdo Ramirez if he's able to be successul against Bivol. You know, certainly he would join the conversation as well. So I think that's a cop-out, the I don't want to fight Mexican fighters routine. I'd love to see a defense for Canelo for all the undisputed title and all the marbles against David Benavidez. And let me tell you something, David Benavidez is the younger guy, so you can't age out David Benavidez. The longer Canelo waits to fight him, the worse it's going to be for him in the aging process, because David is the younger guy. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on this fight. You know, for the Canelo blowhards, I'm sorry. You know, I can't just live about one guy. You know, I got to give praise and criticism where it's deserved, and certainly a merited victory for Canelo. But you know, I can't live with my life up the guy's ass like you guys do. All right, so he's a good fighter, but I would have liked to see him certainly close the show better against a 40-year-old guy that we always knew he was going to beat at this age. Again, like, comment, subscribe, guys. Let me know your comments, and let me know your thoughts on last night's fight and who Canelo should fight next. What do you want to see Canelo do? He's still the most popular fighter, at least on this side of the Atlantic. So what do you want to see him do? I'll talk to you later. I'm Paulie Malignaggi for Paulie TV.